We're counting down 25 things only kids raised by their farm grandparents in the 1950s will truly understand. These are the sounds, smells, and small rituals that filled a childhood spent between the barn and the kitchen table, back when the day started before sunup and nothing on the place ever went to waste. From the rooster that never let you sleep into the porch where the whole family gathered after supper, each one carries the weight of a world that has almost completely disappeared. Expect the ache of hard work, the comfort of a warm kitchen, and the kind of love that never once said the word out loud. If you grew up this way, you'll feel every single one of these. Which memory hits the hardest? Let's begin the countdown with number 25. Number 25. The rooster who ran your whole morning. Long before an alarm clock ever sat on a nightstand, there was that rooster, and he answered to no one. He'd let loose the first crow while the sky was still the color of slate, and whether you were ready or not, the day had begun. Grandpa was already pulling on his boots, and if you lingered under the quilt too long, Grandma's voice carried up the stairs, flat and final. There was no snooze button, no second chance. You learned to swing your feet onto the cold plank floor and get moving, because the animals didn't care that you were tired. That rooster was hated and depended on in equal measure, the unpaid timekeeper of 1,000 farms. Kids raised this way still wake before dawn, out of habit, decades later, listening for a bird that isn't there anymore. Number 24, the cook stove that was the heart of the house. In the corner of that farm kitchen sat a cast iron cook stove, and it was never really cold. Grandma fed it kindling before first light, and the whole room slowly filled with the smell of wood smoke and coffee. That stove did everything. It cooked the biscuits, heated the water, dried the mittens, and pulled the family toward it on a January morning like a magnet. You learned which lids ran hottest and never touched the wrong one twice. Coal or seasoned oak went in through the little door, and the ash got saved for the garden. On the coldest nights, you'd back up to it until your legs near scorched, then turn around and warm the other side. Central heating would come later, clean and quiet, but it never gathered a family the way that iron stove did. Number 23, gathering eggs and the hen who hated you. Every morning there was a basket to fill, and it meant walking into the hen house where the air was thick with dust and feathers and that particular warm animal smell. You slipped a hand under each hen and hoped she was in a giving mood. Most were, but there was always one, and every farm had her, who would peck the back of your hand hard enough to leave a mark and remember your face for a week. Eggs cost a few pennies at the store, but out here they were free, still warm, sometimes with a bit of straw stuck to the shell. You carried that basket back like it was made of glass, because dropping it meant a scolding and a smaller breakfast. Kids of the farm still can't crack a store egg without thinking of that dim, clucking little building. Number 22, drawing water by the pump handle. Before the pipes came, water meant work. You walked out to the pump with a bucket, and you cranked that iron handle up and down until your shoulder burned, priming it, waiting for the first cold gush to come rattling up from deep underground. That water tasted like stone and metal and nothing you can buy today. It filled the wash basin, the coffee pot, the animals' troughs, and every drop was earned. In summer, it ran sweet and cool. In winter, you sometimes had to pour a little warm water down first just to loosen the frozen works. Nobody left a faucet running in that house because there was no faucet, and every gallon had a handle and a sore arm attached to it. That's why farm-raised kids still turn the tap off while they brush their teeth without even thinking. Number 21. The party line and the neighbor who listened. The telephone hung on the wall, a wooden box with a crank, and it was shared. Your ring might be 2 longs and a short, and you learned it the way you learned your own name. But so did everybody else on the line, which meant when the phone rang, half the county could quietly lift the receiver and listen in. Grandma knew exactly who was breathing on the other end and would say so, sharp and sweet, before getting to her business. News traveled that line faster than any newspaper. Birth, death, a barn fire 3 miles off. You waited your turn if someone else was talking, sometimes for an hour. Private conversations simply didn't exist. Kids raised on the party line still remember the strange intimacy of a whole neighborhood pressed together on a single crackling wire. Number 20. The outhouse and the well-worn catalog. Out past the back door, down a little path, stood the outhouse, and using it in January built a kind of character no modern child will ever know. You didn't dawdle. That thick Sears Roebuck catalog served double duty. First, as a wish book you pored over by lamplight, dreaming of things you'd never own, and then page by soft, worn page for the more practical purpose out back. There was a lantern for night trips and a real fear of what might be waiting in the dark corners. Come spring, lime kept things bearable. It was cold, it was humbling, and it was simply how things were. When indoor plumbing finally arrived, it felt like a genuine miracle. Farm kids never once took a warm bathroom for granted after that, and they still don't. Number 19. Wearing the feed sack home. Money was tight, so nothing came in a bag that couldn't be used twice. The flour, the sugar, the chicken feed all arrived in cotton sacks printed with flowers and checks, and the companies knew exactly what they were doing. Grandma picked her feed by the pattern because that fabric was about to become a dress, an apron, a set of curtains, or a boy's shirt. She'd wash the printing off the plain ones and stitch the pretty ones into something to be proud of. A girl could go to school in a dress that started its life holding 50 pounds of hog feed and never think a thing of it, because half the class was dressed the same way. Kids raised this way understand that thrift wasn't shameful. It was skill, and it was love with a needle in its hand. Number 18. The night the lights came on. For much of the early 1950s, plenty of farms still ran on kerosene lamps and lantern light. The whole family gathered inside one soft yellow circle after dark. You did your homework by that flame, cleaned the glass chimneys of their black soot, and went to bed when the light did. Then, the rural electrification lines finally reached down the county roads, pole by pole, and one evening a bare bulb hung from the ceiling, flicked on for the very first time. People wept. They'd flick the switch just to watch it happen again. Suddenly, there was a radio in the kitchen and light in every room without a match. But farm kids never forgot those lamplit years, the smell of kerosene, the shadows on the wall. They knew light was something that arrived, not something you were simply owed. Number 17. Wash day and the wringer that ate your fingers. Monday was wash day, and it was an all-day war. Water got hauled and heated, and the wringer washing machine chugged and sloshed in the corner while Grandma fed the clothes through by hand. That wringer was 2 hard rollers that squeezed the water out, and every child was warned about it in the gravest tones because it would grab a sleeve and a hand right along with it. The clothes went out on the line in every season, snapping in the wind, freezing stiff as boards in December. The whole house smelled of soap and steam by noon. It was hours of bending and lifting and scrubbing collars against a washboard. Kids who grew up watching that labor never once complained about pushing a button on a machine because they knew exactly what clean clothes used to cost. Number 16, making soap in the big black kettle. Come butchering time, nothing got thrown out, and that included the fat. Grandma would set up the big iron kettle in the yard, build a fire under it, and cook down the rendered fat with lye she'd sometimes made herself from wood ashes and rainwater. The smell was sharp enough to clear your sinuses across the whole barnyard. She stirred it with a long wooden paddle, careful as anything because lye was no joke, and she made sure you kept your distance. When it set up, she'd cut it into rough bars that would scrub a floor, a shirt, or a filthy farm kid raw. It wasn't gentle and it wasn't pretty, but it cost nothing and it lasted. Kids of the farm still can't smell strong soap without seeing that steaming kettle and the paddle going round. Number 15, churning butter until your arms gave out. That tall wooden or crockery churn had a job for the youngest hands, and it was slow, monotonous work. You worked the dasher up and down, up and down, through cream that had been skimmed off the top of the milk, and for the longest while nothing seemed to happen at all. Then, right when your arms were ready to quit, the cream would thicken and clump and finally turn, the butter separating out with a soft, sloshing change in sound that meant you were nearly done. Grandma would work it in cold water, salt it, and press it into a mold with a pretty stamp on the bottom. Spread thick on warm bread, it tasted like nothing from a store. Farm kids understand that patience deep in their bone. It's because they learned it one long stroke of the churn at a time. Number 14, chores before you ever ate breakfast. On the farm, you earned your plate. Before a single bite of biscuit, there were animals to see to, and the little ones learned early. Slopping the hogs meant carrying a heavy bucket of kitchen scraps and soured milk out to the pen, where the pigs came running and squealing, and you had to be quick over the fence. There was feed to scatter for the chickens and hay to fork down for the stock, hands stinging in the cold air. Nobody asked if you felt like it. The animals ate first, always, and only then did the family sit down. It taught a child that other lives depended on them and that duty came before comfort. Kids raised this way carry a work ethic that has confused every boss they've ever had since in the very best way. Number 13, milking by hand in the gray morning. The barn at milking time had its own quiet world, warm with the breath of the cows and heavy with the smell of hay and animal. Grandpa or Grandma would settle onto a low stool, lean a forehead into the cow's flank, and the milk would come down into the pail in that steady, hissing rhythm that you never forget. You learned the technique on a patient old cow, your hands aching at first, and if a barn cat sat waiting, a squirt of warm milk shot straight into its open mouth to everyone's delight. That milk went into the house still warm, the cream rising thick on top by evening. Machines and tankers took over later, faster and cleaner. But the child who learned to milk by hand knew the animal, knew the season, and knew where breakfast really came from. Number 12, Sunday. Ice cream cranked by hand. On a hot Sunday afternoon, the ice cream freezer came out, and it turned into an event the whole family circled around. Someone drove into town for a block of ice, which got chipped and packed with rock salt around the metal canister full of sweet cream and sugar and maybe fresh peaches from the tree. Then came the cranking, and it fell to the kids, taking turns as the handle got harder and harder to turn, which meant it was working. The reward for all that aching armed labor was the first soft, cold spoonful, richer than anything ever sold in a shop. The one who cranked the most got the dasher to lick clean. It cost almost nothing but an afternoon of effort. Farm kids still measure store-bought ice cream against that memory, and it always comes up short. Number 11. The root cellar full of a whole summer's work. Down a few earthen steps under the house or the hillside was the root cellar, cool and dark and smelling of soil and apples. This was the family's grocery store, its insurance against a long winter, and it was filled by hand over a whole hard summer. Shelf after shelf of glass jars caught the lantern light. Green beans and tomatoes and peaches and pickles, all canned in the sweltering kitchen while the garden came ready. Potatoes and onions and squash sat in bins, and a crock of something was always working in the corner. You knew that every jar down there was a July afternoon of somebody's sweat. Nothing was wasted, and nothing was taken lightly. Kids of the farm understand that food used to be a year-long promise a family made to itself, sealed one jar at a time. Number 10. The barn cats and the dog who worked for a living. The animals on a farm weren't pets in the way town folks meant it, and yet you loved them fiercely anyway. The barn cats were half wild, kept lean on purpose to hunt mice, and they'd let a kid near them only on their own terms. The farm dog was a true working partner, bringing in the cows, guarding the place, trotting beside the tractor all day, and asking for nothing but a scrap and a scratch behind the ears at night. They had jobs, and they were respected for doing them well. A child learned about loyalty and loss from these animals, learned that a good dog was a member of the family in every way that counted. Farm kids still get a lump in the throat over that one particular dog who followed them everywhere. Number 9. Haying season and the smell that meant summer. When the hay was ready, everything else stopped because a coming rain could ruin a field, and the whole family and half the neighbors turned out. There was no smell on earth like fresh-cut hay drying under a July sun, sweet and green and warm. The little ones rode the wagon and stomped down the load, while the men pitched it up, and the itch of hay chaff got into every collar and sleeve until you couldn't stand yourself. But the work had a rhythm and a purpose, everyone moving together against the weather and the clock, and there was cold water and dinner waiting in the shade. When the barn was full, you slept the sleep of the truly tired. Farm kids catch that hay smell today from a passing field and are 10 years old again in an instant. Number 8. Riding in the truck bed and steering the tractor. Safety was a looser idea back then, and the freedom of it was glorious. You piled into the open bed of the pickup, the wind whipping past, watching the gravel road unspool behind you as you bounced along to town or to church. And the tractor, that was a rite of passage. The day Grandpa let you sit on his lap and steer, or better yet, drive it yourself across the field for the first time, you felt 10 feet tall. That machine was the muscle of the whole operation, and to be trusted with it meant you were becoming somebody who mattered on the place. It was loud and hot, and it demanded respect. Kids raised this way remember the exact moment they were handed a real responsibility and how much taller it made them stand. Number 7. Grandpa's pocket knife and the things he could make. Grandpa always had a pocket knife, worn smooth from years in his palm, and it was never far from reach. That knife did 100 jobs a day, cut the baling twine, peeled an apple handed over in slices, whittled a whistle or a little toy for a bored grandchild on a slow afternoon. Watching those weathered hands work a stick down into something was pure magic. Curls of wood falling away, to reveal a shape hiding inside. When he judged you ready, he handed you a knife of your own and taught you to cut away from yourself, patient and serious, because a farmer's tools were not toys. You carried that lesson your whole life. Farm kids still feel a certain way about a good pocket knife, and plenty of them still have grandpas, dull now but kept. Number 6, butchering day when the whole family showed up. Once or twice a year, usually when the weather turned cold enough, came the day the family put up its meat for the winter, and it was a serious all-hands affair that no one questioned. Neighbors traded help back and forth, one farm one week and the next the following, and the work was hard and went from dawn to dark. Every part was used. The hams and bacon set to cure in the smokehouse, the fat rendered for cooking and soap, sausage ground, and seasoned by a recipe kept in Grandma's head. There was a solemn respect to it, an understanding of exactly where food came from and what it cost. Children learned that meat was not something wrapped in plastic, but a real animal and a season of work. Farm kids grew up without illusions, and they were the stronger for it. Number 5, the garden and shelling peas on the porch. The garden wasn't a hobby, it was survival, and it was enormous. The whole family planted it, weeded it under the beating sun, and picked it clean all summer long. And then came the shelling and snapping, done in the cool of the evening on the porch steps, a big bowl in every lap, hands moving on their own while the talk went round. You popped the pods and thumbed out the peas, snapped the beans into pieces, and the pile in the bowl slowly grew as the light went golden and then gray. It was tedious and endless, and somehow it was also some of the best time the family ever spent together. Nobody rushing, everybody talking. Farm kids can still shell a bowl of peas without looking, and they miss those slow porch evenings more than they can rightly say. Number 4, Sunday dinner after church. Sunday was the one day the pace eased, and dinner in the middle of the day was the reward for the whole week. After church, the kitchen filled with steam, and the whole clan gathered, aunts and uncles and cousins spilling in, the table stretched with every leaf it had. There was fried chicken caught and dressed that very morning, mashed potatoes and gravy, green beans cooked long with a bit of ham, biscuits and pie that had no equal anywhere on earth. The kids often ate at a second table and couldn't wait to graduate to the grown-up one. Grace was said, and it was meant. This was the meal that held a family together, week after week, season after season. Farm kids carry the memory of that crowded, laughing table as the very picture of home, and no restaurant has ever come close. Number 3, evenings on the porch with no television. When the work was finally done and the dishes washed, the family gathered on the porch as the day cooled, and this was the entertainment. There was no glowing screen pulling everyone into separate corners. Instead, there was the creak of the rocker, the snap of Grandpa's suspenders, and the long, unhurried stories, the same ones told 100 times and loved more each time. The firelights came up out of the grass, the whip poor will called from the tree line, and a child could lie on the warm boards and listen to the low murmur of the grown-ups and feel completely safe in the world. Nothing was happening, and everything was. Farm kids understand that the richest hours of their childhood had no schedule and no purpose but simply being together, and they'd give anything for one more of those evenings. Number 2, Grandma's kitchen and the smell of baking bread. The kitchen was the soul of that house, and Grandma was its steady center. It always smelled of something good, of bread rising under a clean towel, of a pie in the oven, of coffee and wood smoke and cinnamon. She never seemed to sit down. She baked bread by feel, no measuring cups, just hands that knew. And the first warm slice with butter melting into it was the taste of being loved. She kept a jar of buttons and a tin of biscuits and a soft spot for a grandchild who wandered in hungry. That kitchen was warmth and safety and belonging, all wrapped in an apron. Farm kids can close their eyes right now and be standing in that doorway, watching those hands work, wishing more than anything they could walk in one more time and be fed. Number 1, knowing you were needed and knowing you were loved. And the thing that farm-raised children understand most deeply of all, the one that outlasts every rooster and root cellar and porch evening, is this. On that farm, you mattered. Your small hands did real work that the family actually depended on, and a child who is truly needed grows up sure of their own worth in a way nothing else can give. Your grandparents rarely said the word love out loud. They showed it instead in a warm kitchen, an amended shirt, and a knife handed down, and a hand on your shoulder at the end of a long day. They came from hardship you could barely imagine, and they turned it into a childhood you'd give anything to relive. They're gone now, most of them, and the farms are sold or grown over. But farm kids carry them still, in the way they work, the way they save, and the way they love without needing to say it. That was the countdown. 25 things only kids raised by their farm grandparents in the 1950s will ever truly understand. If even one of these took you back, tell me down in the comments which one hit the hardest, and share the name of the grandparent you are thinking about right now. Somebody out there needs to hear that they were not the only one. They knew how to live, and now so do we.